Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's session with Kneomedia. Before we hear from James Kellett, CEO of Kneomedia, a couple of quick reminders. The format of today's presentation, again, is designed to be interactive. We'll aim to hear a quick 5 or 10 minute overview of the company from James, followed by a Q&A session. We do acknowledge that some of you may be familiar with Kneomedia, others you may be hearing the story for the first time. We also encourage you to submit anonymous questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll aim to have this session wrapped up by about 3:55 today. So without further ado, James, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam, and I welcome both the existing shareholders of Kneomedia and also those who are new to the company. This is certainly a high-level description of the company and what we're doing, and intended probably for those that are not familiar with the company. But let's get stuck into it because I want to leave quite a lot of time for the Q&A which follows on. Just a quick overview of who Kneomedia is. We're an Australian domiciled edtech company. We're listed on the ASX and also OTC markets in the US. We deliver digital learning and assessment programs via our worldwide educational software platform, a SaaS software platform. NeoWorld, which is our global curriculum-aligned math, reading, and social emotional education platform, is our flagship platform, and we target pre-K grades up to grade 6. Our main business is B2B. We don't focus on the home market at all, and we focus very, very much on the US, and we've established relationships across multiple markets, laying a foundation for future growth, and we're seeing that future growth now. Our primary market has been the United States, where we've spent quite a number of years in developing some excellent relationships, but also going through the very long process of approvals and through their various procurement departments and co-designing particularly with the New York City Department of Education. Most importantly, the Department of Education in New York is a bellwether for other education systems. It's the largest education system in the world. There are 3 that follow that we're also involved with, Florida, Illinois, and the last one is, of course, California, where we're still planning to move into that market. We've currently got 16,000 students across the US, representing a very small fraction of 23 million US elementary students, and I'll talk to that later when we look at our market opportunities. Beyond the US, Kneomedia's secondary markets also include the UK and our joint venture in the Philippines, and I'll discuss that further as well. Milestone opportunities. I'm often asked that it's taken us some time to get to where we are. I'll start by saying that New York City Department of Education has a $38 billion budget, has 135,000 employees and 3,000 people in product procurement. So it is a very long process. It's linked very much to New York City Council. It's standalone from New York State, an umbrella from New York State, but it's very much standalone with its own budget. And it's probably the most difficult market to penetrate, but we've managed to do that. But it certainly does take time, takes resources, takes political connections, and it takes a team of people based in the US, particularly in New York, to achieve that the success that we've got. And I do speak of success. I'm often asked, why has it taken so long for us to get to where we are? Well, it just does. In New York City, it just does. So let's just look at some of the things that we have achieved. We've looked at a number of paid deployments, and you can see there that there's quite a few that have gone through. I'm looking 1, 2, 3, 4 paid deployments. And also to give you some indication, in September 2019, we did our first pilot at A&M University in Florida, and it wasn't until June 22 when we actually achieved our first substantial sale. And I'll speak more about sales that we're developing in Florida as we move along. One of the most important developments that occurred in November of this year was our Connect All Kids program and the announcement that the New York City Department of Education had provided 40,000 Dell Chromebooks to be accompanied with Neo World licenses and professional development training under the umbrella of Connect All Kids initiative, which we commenced some years ago. Now, it's taken us some time to continue to work with the DOE to have those licenses deployed and in fact get payment for those licenses. But in April, we received the final documentation that the first 700,000 payment under that deployment is on its way through, and we expect to see that in the next week or so. And it's been a long process, but as I said earlier, the Department of Education is indeed a massive organisation, has many, many departments and procurement processes, but that first payment of the substantial amount that we did announce, subject to contract in November, is on its way through. Reason we announced that at that time in November is that the NAACP in the initiative, and again I'll talk about the NAACP, did announce that the first step of the initiative had taken place, so it was a material factor for us to announce at that time. We didn't expect it would take this long until we received payment, however, it's happening now. Also in April, delightfully, we've had a renewal from Florida of their 12-month licenses. This is not an NAACP initiative, Connect All Kids initiative. This is a single Kneomedia initiative. And we've now had an annual renewal of those licenses, and they've pre-ordered another 1,000 licenses for the start of the school year. During the course of May this year, we've spent a lot of time with our technical partners, and the purpose of this is to join with leading global but US-based education technical partners that would provide us with the additional services we need as they do with others without us having to build them. The consequence of that is a substantial cost reduction in ongoing development of our platform, but it also keeps us very much at the forefront with these leading global organisations. I'll just flip to our next slide and look at our primary market. And as you can see, there's 23 million pre-K to 6 students in the US. And currently we're focused on 2 of the major markets. One of them
Sorry, James, do you just want to click through to the next slide there of milestones?
It hasn't gone through? Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Thank you. So our primary market is the United States. As you can see, there's 23 million pre-K to 6 students. Our national rollout objective, Connect All Kids initiative, the NAACP and Dell collaboration. We subscribe to the mandatory requirement of both online and offline education, which is one of the new, I guess, procurement requirements that's been introduced more recently. New York and Florida, 2 of our 4 largest US state education systems, commonly act as bellwether for smaller states. Our future targets, as I mentioned earlier, California, Los Angeles, and Chicago in Illinois, and they make up the 4 largest education systems within the US. In New York City and state, there's 2,200,000 students alone from pre-K to 6. We've now got 15,000 licenses currently deployed, 40,000 licenses in relation to the Connect All Kids Chromebook initiative, of which 9,000 have now been deployed. And in the state of Florida, there's nearly 2 million pre-K to 6 students, 400,000 early learning centres and students across 6,500 ELCs. We've got 1,000 licenses there with another new 1,000 licenses coming on board in the start of the next school year. Those I mentioned earlier, that first 1,000 licenses have now been renewed, which is just a testimony to the value of the product. I can also say we've been asked to take some data from existing vendors in Florida and build that into NeoWorld as they wish to switch across to NeoWorld from their incumbent education and assessment platforms. So again, that's particularly pleasing for us and augurs well for the future in Florida. At the moment, we're in Osceola County. We're working very closely with Hillsborough and Polk County, and we expect that as we move further through the counties that more and more will come on board. So Florida looks particularly promising for us. One of the key things in our establishing ourselves in the US has been our alliances. How does a small Australian company compete with some of the majors in the US? And that's largely been because of the relationships we've been able to form. First and foremost of that was become a Google education partner, which was a long process, and we did that quite some time ago. NAACP is a formidable organisation with 2,200 chapters across the US. They joined the program because they are for equality in education. I'll speak separately about that Connect All Kids program in a moment. Dell Technologies obviously providing the Chromebooks where there's a shortage, particularly in the lower socioeconomic public school systems. And the public school systems in the US are very different to Australia. They are community schools. They are funded separately from literally by suburb, and consequently there's a vast difference between the level of education provided. The NAACP is working to try and flatten out that discrepancy, and NeoWorld is now the centre of their education piece. Obviously, New York City DOE is absolutely key to us. Sorry, I'll just flick back on that slide. Is absolutely key to us, and we're having a lot of success there, and we continue to have success. I've spoken about Florida at some length already with the licenses that we have there. And our next step beyond New York City. New York City is the only city in the US which is a separate education department to the state. It is subservient to New York State, but it is a separate budget, a separate education system. However, we're closely working with New York State DOE that also use New York City as a bellwether. Just moving on to the Connect All Kids initiative. One of the things to understand with the New York City public school system is they're actually community schools. So they involve not only the schools, the classroom, the district, but also the home, to the point that they actually have monthly town hall meetings where parents attend, hopefully they attend, and parents are very much involved in the schools, and they're trying more and more to get parents further involved. The initiative we've created with the NAACP has been one that's brought all these factors together. And by doing that, we've been able to empower the kids, we've been able to educate the kids, and we have an extraordinary assessment platform. And that really is the key to what's been our success in New York. It's been the success of so far to what we've been able to roll out. It's also been an absolute initiative of the Chancellor, David Banks of New York City DOE, and Mayor Eric Adams, which I can say we are politically very closely aligned with and in contact with. So we're progressing particularly well in New York. I know there's frustration with existing shareholders about the time it takes for us to get paid, but I can tell you that that is typical of New York City DOE. All vendors suffer the same delays. But as you would have seen by that earlier slide, we do get paid in the fullness of time, as frustrating as it is. I think that probably gives a quick high-level overview of where we are. And so I thank you for taking the time to watch the slides and go through those, but also I now welcome any questions that you may have to elaborate on what I've spoken on.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. That's a good overview. It's obviously great that a little business, as you say, can, sort of partner and have an alliance with tech behemoths like Dell and the NAACP, which is obviously important to the public school sector. How important has that Connect All Kids initiative been for Kneomedia? And can you provide some insight into the expected timeline for the rollout into other school districts within New York and then outside of New York?
Sure. A little bit of background, Sam. As we started the Connect All Kids program really as a marketing exercise to expand NeoWorld, but we really did need support. Education in the public school systems in the US, particularly in New York, are highly political. The NAACP has subsequently joined us. They're a 100-year-old organisation focusing on equality and education for all, and obviously that's not currently the situation in New York City, where there's enormous discrepancies between the level of education that's provided, and that's largely based on the funding, which is local council based effectively. So you can imagine that there's huge discrepancies between somewhere in the middle of Manhattan versus somewhere in the back of Harlem. We've become the centrepiece, I guess, of the NAACP's drive for equality and for education. And I'd also say that probably most teachers are a member of the NAACP, and they're also working to rectify this. Dell joined us in recognition of the program, the shortage of Chromebooks and devices, and they certainly are the preferred supplier of devices which are of military grade durability. And obviously they kicked off with a 40,000 Neo-World license to go with them. It was really due to the absence of devices during COVID that amplified the issue of lack of devices, lack of Wi-Fi, and all the issues that the Connect All Kids program is now dealing with, which creates the opportunity.
Okay, great, thank you. And just on COVID, presumably COVID represented a challenge for the business. Were there any other learnings observed both internally and from the education departments you've been dealing with?
Well, the stunning thing for us, Sam, was that, and as for most Australians, was that when COVID struck, we for one moment did not realise that there was a vast shortage of devices and Wi-Fi availability in the homes, particularly in the lowest socio-economic groups. And we were quite stunned. So instead of our online product leaping off the shelf, as some people thought it would, there was a huge problem because these kids did not have devices for online learning. And secondly, the parents didn't have quality Wi-Fi for online learning. However, that turned out to be the silver lining, if you like, because it amplified the problem. And since then, there's been a substantial rollout of equipment, our 40,000 Chromebooks in this initiative, and we've been part of promoting that and amplifying that issue, albeit that every program today still must be available both online and offline, and ours is. So it's really created an opportunity. Well, it was a 2 years hiatus for us where we sat there with obviously our ongoing costs, and we continued with our product development and managed to get through those 2 years, although it did set us back literally 2 years in sales, if you like.
Okay, great, thank you. And just changing gears to the technology and the innovation, how does a company stay ahead of emerging trends and advancements within the industry? One thing that's come up a lot in this conference this week is artificial intelligence. Do you see that as a hindrance, or do you think it enhances penetration in the US market?
I'm glad you raised that, Sam. Firstly, we've got the best technical partners. We have technical partners that are based in the US with companies of the size of 7,000 employees who are API into what we're doing, and we're able to leverage them as well. Also, it may be of interest to everybody to know that we've been using AI to develop our content for quite some months now. As an example of that, a teacher's guide, which consists of normally 120 pages for a particular unit of education and instruction, would take about 2 weeks in a template version. Having adopted AI, we can now do that in less than a day, and we can have 20 computers prompting at the same time, running 24/7. So certainly, in terms of the changing trend, we're very much part of the changing trend, and we've been able to increase our content build out as we move up through the grades up towards year 6, because we're not there all the way yet. We've started with pre-K and we're building out through the years. So that's meant that our iteration has been rapidly increased. But secondly, the cost, of course, is minimal when you're using AI. You still need human oversight. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But in terms of creating the initial pieces, it's been extraordinarily successful for us.
Okay, great.
One of the important things that I would mention, we are at the foundational level of education. So whilst there's much discussion at the moment about how AI will move into education and take over education, there's 2 very important things that kids need to do before they can actually embark upon their AI prompting journey. They need to be able to read and write. They need to understand maths. And that's what we teach. That's where we're at. So we're at I guess we're with those trends. We're at the forefront of those trends, but also we're in a very solid base with these younger elementary students, rather than being at the higher education ends, which where there's much talk about threat to universities and so forth.
Okay, great, thank you. And we've just got a question coming in on staffing or headcount. Can you give us an understanding of how many staff are actually based in New York? What are their sort of regular call cycles to meet with clients and promote the benefits of Kneomedia? And how often are they having those types of meetings?
Yeah, we use a number of contractors, first of all, that are working on the platform in terms of product development. So we outsource much of that. We do have a team within New York. Obviously, we've got a resident mainboard director over there. We also have someone seconded to the NAACP as one of our staff. We also have a key customer liaison. We have several other people as well. But it's interestingly, this is not a case where you have 500 salespeople and increase your sales by 500. This is a case where you deal with a specific group in the teaching and learning department of DOE, and knocking on the door and saying, "Here I am," doesn't do it. It's about long relationships. So we don't need a vast number of people. Anybody looking at our 4C would see that our costs are static. The most important thing is that we can roll out, but because it's a SaaS model, we can continue to roll out large numbers without a vast increase. So we would expect that our costs reduce proportionately as we increase our numbers. I don't know whether that answers the question, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea. For example, in Florida, we have 2 key people there and a consulting specialist as well that look after Florida. We have 4 people that are permanent in, 5 people that are permanent in New York, and then we have a number of contractors that are working on the development of product and advising us, and they're from New York City DOE, where we co-design and make sure we're totally aligned.
Okay, great, thank you. And just on that design element, maybe just the final question in the interest of time, how does the company protect its intellectual property?
Well, I think there's 2 parts of that, if I can. First of all, I'd say that our market advantage is because of the content that we've got. And so there's 2 parts of really protecting intellectual property. One is it being at the forefront and being a leader and having a product that quite simply won't be replicated quickly. And secondly, there is the traditional copyright and trademarking. But in terms of really protecting our product, I say to you that it's our market edge. If out-of-school viewing can be so engaging, why not education? I mean, there's so many rich engagement programs that are out there today that kids are viewing. For those with younger kids, Bluey, for example, it's educational. It's about kindness. It's social, emotional. So if they're viewing out of school such rich and good programs, why can't education be the same? And that's our major competitive advantage, along with traditional IP protection.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's about all the time we have for questions today. If there were any follow-up questions from the audience, or you'd like to connect with James to talk about the business, please feel free to reach out to us or James. His contact details are on the screen there. And I think that completes the session with James. I'll pass it back to you for any closing comments.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for everybody that joined us today. My contact details are also on our Neo World and Kneomedia website. Please that includes my mobile and email address. Please feel free to contact me directly if you so wish, and thank you for your attendance today.
All right, great. That concludes the session and concludes the second day of the NWR Vantage Point conference. Thanks very much for joining. Goodbye.